Why did it take you 10 years?
Well, part of it was I put it off so much when I was doing the journalism. I never had a contract. I never had an agent while I was working on it. So there was really no one who was demanding that I finish it. And so I would put it off for months, and then I'd go back to it, and then I would have that despair of, oh, it's so flat. Who's interested? I mean, every writer goes through this. Mm-hmm. Every writer I know who's ever worked on a novel, they go back to it, and they feel like it was written by an alien, like, what was I thinking? And then you get a little bit further into it, and you realize, oh, no, there is something here. So part of it was I never took the time off. I could have easily wrapped it up much faster if I'd just taken the time off, blocked out the time, you know, and done nothing else.
When did you finish the story? In other words, I'm interested in the process of you saying, I've got the story.
Yeah.
I got to make it better and better and better and better. Because you have this reputation of fine-tuning your work.
Well, I'm trying to think of probably a couple years, and then a lot of it was rewriting and rewriting. I wrote the first draft longhand, and that actually only took me about 7 or 8 months in longhand. But then I had to put in the computer, and I wrote huge sections that I never then put into the computer because I looked at them and I went, what was I thinking? You know, I mean, I realized that I really is detours, and so it's a constant going over the material, but also. If I got to a place where I was blocked in the story, I wouldn't just fix it, I would write a new chapter. Because that way you keep putting new energy into the book. Most novels, and I've known this from experience.
To be blocked means that you don't know where to go from here?
Or worse, and I see this with a lot of fiction, you force the novel in a direction it didn't want to go because you thought that's where it should go. In other words, you sort of overruled your unconscious. You didn't know what to do, and you'd say, okay, I'm going to have him do this. And when you go back and look at it, you realize how forced it is. And it's something I now see even more in other people's work. And actually, I sympathize because when I read it, I go, oh, I was exactly that spot. Because all of a sudden they'll bring in a new character you haven't seen before, or they have the characters take a trip that's totally unmotivated. So, but what I would do is I would just say, I don't want that tail off of energy at the end of a novel that I often see in other fiction, because writers experience fatigue. There's like a mental fatigue.
And you can feel it in the writing.
You can feel it, and you can sense that every writer at a certain point, they just want to finish. It's like they just want to finish. Dear God, save me from this. And that can be dangerous because you can finish at the expense of really carrying it through.
This is an inside New York book. A sense of this city, this place, this... Yes?
Yeah, no, it's an inside New York book in the sense of that it's about the feel of living in New York. Right. I wanted that sort of daily feel of living in New York, but I didn't want...
The pulse of a city, or just the sense of how one relates
well, actually,
to a place?
I wanted to do people who were not on the fast track. I deliberately did not want to do... I didn't want to do people who were like dot-commers. Right. Because, I'll tell you something, the funny thing was, when the dot-com thing was booming, I thought, if this thing implodes, then my book is going to be dated by the time it comes out, and I didn't want to do people who were, on the treadmill and they're phoning their agent, I wanted people who, because there are a lot of people in New York who kind of putter around.
And because you want to get at that existence, that notion of those people putter around, and the sense of dealing with the social aspect of one's life.
Well, also, I wanted to deal with the thing of, what does it mean to live in New York and not be a success? Is that doable? Because we all know that there's almost like, it's almost like a ticker tape running across a room. You go to a party and you're aware of how am I doing? Or it's something people worry about. How am I doing? How is so-and-so doing?
This is a city that celebrates achievers.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things people do in New York is when they meet someone, the first question will be like, well, what do you do? Yeah. Like in the South, they might say, well, who's your folks? Exactly. Who's your family?
Yeah, where are you from?
Right. Here, it's like, what do you do? And I've seen people, if they give an answer that's not sexy or glamorous, click off. It's like, oh, well, you're not important enough for me to talk to, and then they move on.
Now that you've finished this, what would you do different?
I think the only thing I would do different is I would sort of tighten up the process of doing it. I would not have let as much time elapse.
So. That's a good idea.
But I would actually
say, we have not that many novels in your life.
I know. I'll be like I'll be like Proust in the cork-lined room, except that he turned out quite a shelf. I would tighten up the process. Also, I would confer with people further down the line because my wife is actually a great editor for my work.
Yeah.
And I would.
What do you mean confer with them down the line? Meaning?
Well, because the thing was, at certain points, I went in wrong directions in the novel, but it was because I didn't talk to anybody. I just did it myself, and then other people would go, "Oh, I don't know about that." But it's very dangerous because one of the things I realize is, because I've seen this with other writers, if you ask for advice too early and you get like a sort of discouragement, or you get a flat response, that kills people's morale. No matter how big your ego is, if you show somebody a chapter and they kind of like shrug it off, or, oh, that's nice,
yeah, right.
It plummets.
Yeah.
And it's a very rare writer who can say, well, I'm just going to do it anyway. So you have to protect your morale, particularly early on.
Will this change you at all, in a sense? I mean, now that you've written this, now that it's here, now that there's a story, now that you've got your friends saying terrific things about it? I mean, Gore Vidal saying, not since Dawn Powell as a novelist caught so well the heterosexual showbiz New York City male. You could live with that.
I can live with that. Well, also, I'm not only a great fan of Gore Vidal, I'm a great fan of Dawn Powell's. I mean, Dawn Powell was, in a sense, a model for what I was trying to do.
Right. And James Wolcott is a supreme American culture critic. He's sharply observant and vividly descriptive. His work has guts, and so Camille Paglia. And it goes on to some that you people like Henry Alford, who you also admire. Brilliant.